for our Jews on Ohlone land Teshuvah, practicing Teshuvah workshop. My name is Ariel Lucky. We'll do a quick introduction of our facilitators and then jump in. I just want to note at the very top, we are recording this session. We're going to use Zoom in speaker's view, so that means pretty much you won't be on it. But just so you know, any participation that you choose to do is being recorded. But only the talking folks are going to be actually filmed. So very quickly, my name is Ariel Lucky. I use he and him pronouns. I'm here in Huichin, Oakland, California. And I work at Segura Tate Land Trust in the day, and at night, I organize our community with Jews on Ohlone land. I am a father and an activist, and yeah, excited to see you all, and I'll pass it to Mira.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mira. I use she and they pronouns. I live in East Oakland on Chichenyo Ohlone land, but I grew up in San Francisco on Ramaytush Ohlone land, third generation San Franciscan. Went to Brandeis Hillel Day School with Ava Rosen on the call. Old school Frisco Jew life over here. I'm a plant person. I'm a dog mom. I have a partner. I'm a former high school teacher and current organizer and facilitator, consultant, all the above. Been organizing with Jewel for the last 15, 16 months, whenever Jewel was birthed, and really excited to be here today.
Awesome.
To Leo.
Thanks both. My name's Leo, Leora. I use they, she pronouns. I'm also in Oakland, but I grew up on Wapunus Nisenan Miwok land in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. And I'm in graduate school now at Star King School in Berkeley, and I'm studying Jewish relationships with Indigenous folks. So this work is really close to my heart. Really glad to be here with all of you.
Sweet. So yeah, just a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. We're talking about practicing Teshuvah as Jews on Ohlone land, and we'll get more in depth later, but Jews on Ohlone land, or Jewel, as you will hear people refer to it, we are a network of Jewish folks in the East Bay, working in solidarity with Indigenous folks, specifically the Lashon Ohlone, but the entire Indigenous community here in the East Bay, and specifically with an accountable and kind of deep relationship with the Segura Tate Land Trust. Our goal is to get 100% Jewish participation in the She'umi land tax, which we'll talk about in more depth later. And we just want to say from the top that there's we're all different kinds of Jews in Jewel. There's no one right way to be Jewish. We come from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different affiliations, a lot of different orientations. We're all drawing on our heritage and our family and our traditions in different ways as we come into this, do this work. We do want to acknowledge that our facilitation team, Mira and Leora and I, are all Ashkenazi Jewish, but that, you know, this work is for everyone who is down with it, and our network includes lots of different people, different Jews and different backgrounds. And not everybody, you know, we don't assume that everybody has a relationship with Eastern Europe or the Holocaust or any of those kinds of things. And we also acknowledge that a lot of folks have both Jewish and Indigenous heritage. So this isn't just a solidarity, you know, model or relationship that, you know, all of us are connected to these things and through our peoples and in different ways. So yeah, so that's a little bit about who we are, and I'll swing it over to you, Mira.
Thank you, Ariel. So in today's work, we are going to be covering a lot of content and history and notions that might bring up a lot of different emotion or trigger or pain or heaviness for folks, as well as a lot of, you know, the joy and hope of what we're doing as well. But we might be sharing history that is new for you, or perhaps history that is not new, but is rooted in a lot of pain. And so we want to make sure that you are being in tune with your body, as we, particularly those of us who are conditioned as white, are very separated from mind and body, and a lot of our organizing and intellectual work is very disconnected from the somatic experience. So we're going to try a little breathing exercise that you can do throughout this session if you notice yourself becoming overwhelmed or heavy with what we bring up. So I ask you to close your eyes and take a seat, or get rooted in your seat if you're already seated, and to just feel the surface underneath you. Maybe it's a chair or a couch or the floor or the earth. And we're going to do some 415 breathing, not just in honor of my city's area code, but a good balance of inhale, holding, and exhale. So we're going to inhale for a count of 4. We're going to hold it for a count of 1, and we're going to exhale for a count of 5. So we'll practice a few times together. All right, so take an inhale for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll do it again. And inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 1, and then exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do one more time on your own count. Your inhale, your hold, and your exhale. And we might prompt you to come back to this breathing at different points throughout our evening, but if you feel called at any point to do so on your own, please remember that you are in your body, and your body has a lot of feelings and knowledge happening within it. So to tune back into the experience there. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Leo.
Thank you, Mira. So for those of you who are able to bring a bowl of water, I invite you to bring it forward now. And it can be imaginary. That's good too. So we're bringing in the element of water this evening, as many people consider a counterbalance to fire. And we really want to acknowledge how out of balance water. We honor it, and we ask that it hold us today in our time together. And then if you feel called afterward, after we get off the call, you can offer this water back to the earth as a way to begin the repair of our relationship with all the elements, and in particular fire. So thank you, water, for being here with us. And I'm going to share a little bit about what's going on in Jewish time right now. So for a lot of Jewish people, not for all Jewish people, but for a lot of folks, right now is one of our New Years. There's several New Years, and this is the New Year of the human, of us. And in preparation for this rule, there's a practice called Teshuvah, which translates to return. The idea is to return to a time before a harm was done, to return to the wholeness. And the practice of Teshuvah involves doing an accounting within yourself of the ways in which you've inflicted harm, and then asking for forgiveness, and believing that you're capable to wholeness. And Teshuvah can be done in our interpersonal relationships. It can be done in our relationship with the divine, the more than human world. And it can also be done collectively as part of a people or a nation or a spiritual group. And so for those of us who some part of our lineage is not indigenous to this land, and for those of us who are living in diaspora, this moment in Jewish time to reflect on our relationships with the land and the people who are indigenous to this land, and potentially of repair and returning to a time before things were broken. And if the Jewish frame doesn't resonate with you, we also want to offer a restorative justice frame. And restorative justice holds that collective healing is possible, and all of us exist somewhere in the spectrum and in the axis of being harmed and inflicting harm. Our ancestry and us personally exist somewhere in that murkiness. And that through healing ourselves and through finding alignment within ourselves to heal that came before us, and also to set healing for those who come after us. So with that, like, just simple framing, I'd love for a few folks to write into the box, what's one Teshuvah practice or restorative practice that you have either specifically during this time of year, during this moment in Jewish time, or in general, and then I'll read them out loud to the group. Deep listening, centered accountability. Thank you. I wrote a song based on Buddhist forgiveness practice that I sing most days. Connecting with loved ones who I haven't spoken with for a long time. Calling in from the unceded land of Tongva Chumash people in Los Angeles. We give back compost to all of the trees in our land for Teshuvah. Beautiful. Composting, doing tashlich, personally where I've missed the mark. Therapy, self-work. Reflective journaling on immediate and distant relationships, especially parents. Awesome, thank you everyone.
All right, so part of, we've been cultivating a number of practices as Jews on Ohlone land, and one of the things that we've been doing, that many people have started to do over the last handful of years, is land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements is kind of it's a tricky thing because it sometimes can feel super rhetorical and super superficial. And like you're just going to check off the box and say it and feel good about it and move on and not really integrate it. That's the danger of land acknowledgements. On the other hand, we've seen, I think it can be a powerful point of entry for information and spreading awareness about where we are in the history of the land that we're on. And it can also be just a deep practice of every day thinking about where we are and the land that we're on, and connecting to the land and connecting to the history of it. And if it's a point of entry for folks to have deeper engagement and deeper action, then that's a good thing. So there's lots of different dynamics around land acknowledgements, but I want to offer one now. And I know I think most of us are here in the East Bay, but we're also all over. So I'm going to share something for For here, where I am on this land, and if you are in another place geographically, I invite you to, think about how that might apply or variations that you need to make to adapt it to where you are. But right now, I am on Lashan Ohlone land, where people have been living for thousands of years, 5, 7, 8, 10,000 years on this place, tucked in the bay, in the little stretch between the first row of hills, where the fog banks roll in. And this is Ohlone land. It has been for a very, very long time, and it still is. The Ohlone community is still here, still fighting for their sacred sites, still reclaiming their culture, and taking care of this place and this land. Folks have been holding it down for longer than I can even really imagine or wrap my head around. This is a place lived, and elk next to the bay full of sea otters. This is a place where redwood trees grew to be hundreds of feet tall, where oaks, spread, and millions of birds flew. Until very recently, all of that has changed in a very quick amount of time. This is a place where colonization and genocide happened. Folks came from other places around the world and brought guns, brought prisons, brought death and disease, and wreaked havoc in a very short amount of time on the Ohlone people and all of the plants and animals that lived here and continue to live here. So this is a place of incredible, radical, painful, brutal, and sometimes beautiful transformation and active struggle over power and politics, race and class and land. And it is still very much today a place of active struggle. There was a hearing in the city of Richmond last night about the corporate development plans for Point Maladi, turning more open bayfront property into commercial real estate, condos and apartments and whatnot. So this is the place of all of those things. And for me, it is a daily practice to try to remember all of that and hold the complexity and the pain of all of that, and to think about what that means for me to live here. What is my responsibility and what is my relationship to this place and to that history? So here we are. And Amira, do you want to take us away?
So in thinking about the thousands and thousands of years of Ohlone presence on this land, we want to put it in conversation and in juxtaposition to our presence on this land. So works a little bit easier in person if you can see everybody's body, but maybe you can put your screen on gallery mode. And if you're able and willing, please raise your hand if you live in the Bay Area, or you can indicate some other way. If you live in the Bay Area currently. Awesome. Keep your hand raised if you and at least one of your parents are from here. Keep your hand raised. Keep your hand raised if you, one of your parents, and one of your grandparents are from here. And keep your hand raised if you, one of your parents, one of your grandparents, and one of your great-grandparents is from here. Not any of us from what I can see on the screen, which is such a short, incredibly minuscule representation of time in comparison to literally hundreds and hundreds of generations of Native folks on this land. We do this often to, name, of course, even those of us who are Jewish and on this land, a lot of us haven't been in the same place as our more than a generation or two. I feel very privileged to have several generations in San Francisco, but beyond that, there's a lot of displacement and a lot of migration around this land. And a lot of us Jews, particularly Ashkenazi Jews in diaspora, can't really trace back in one place for a while, of course, in comparison to Native folks on this land. So I'm gonna pass it on to you, Ariel. We'll hear a little bit directly from Karina Gold.
Yeah, so one of our practices as Jews on Ohlone land, we've developed kind of some guiding principles, and one of them is that we don't speak for Indigenous people. Indigenous folks speak for themselves, and that when we speak for ourselves, and kind of owning and naming our own positionality and you know how we show up in this practice. So so we always try to listen to the voices of Indigenous leaders and folks who are in the community and doing the work on the front line. So what we'd like to do is take a few minutes and play a video excerpt from a short documentary called Beyond Recognition that features Karina Gould, who is Lashon Ohlone. She's from Oakland, has lived here all of her life, and she can trace her family to pre-Spanish contact. One of the crazy things about the Catholic priests is that they took very accurate notes and like genealogy, family trees of all the Native folks that they were enslaving at the missions. So she has actually an intact family tree that goes all the way back to pre-Spanish contact here in the East Bay. She is the co-founder and director of the Segorte Land Trust and has been a community activist around sacred sites and a number of issues here for over 2 decades. So we'll take about, I don't know, I think it's about 6 minutes to check out this video clip, and then we'll come back together and move on.
Jesse, I think you forgot to share the sound.
All right, a little technical difficulties. We'll iron it out in just a second. Start over.
Okay, we'll try to start it over with the sound. Not sure why that wasn't working.
All right, thanks, Jesse.
Porsche Tuhe, Ka'at Lashanka, Ka'at La Rak Grina. Yeah, say good morning. Good morning. Oh, good morning. How are you guys? All right. So the language that I just talked to you guys in is called Chochenyo. Can you guys say Chochenyo? Chochenyo. Chochenyo was the very first language that was ever spoken here in Oakland. And my great-grandfather, Jose Guzman, was one of the last speakers of the language. Is that cool? Yeah. All right. Who can tell me who were the very first people who lived here in Oakland were? Starts with an O, but it's not Oaklanders. Ohlone. Any guys, you guys heard of that word before? Oh, okay. All right, all right. What kind of animal lives in the shell? It starts with an A, and it rhymes with Ohlone.
Baloney.
Close?
Baloney.
Abalone. We lived all over the Bay Area at one time. And can you imagine Oakland had no streets? It had no buildings?
What?
Oh my gosh, at one time there was a place, Oakland, it wasn't even called Oakland, right? It was called Huchin. This is Mission San Jose, and that's in Fremont. Once my ancestors went to these missions, they couldn't speak their own languages, and they couldn't eat their own foods. It was really scary for Ohlone people a long time ago. There was particular kinds of colonization that happened to California Indians up and down the coast.
The Spanish sponsored the Catholic Church to come in and establish missions to domesticate the native people. They didn't want to get rid of them, they wanted a labor force. The way to do that is to disconnect their cultural cohesion. Native people got brought into the mission, baptized. 90% of the people died. Then the following American period where they were just interested in dead Indians so they could take the land. And the state of California made these crazy laws which made it illegal to be Indian in California. So remember I said that our ancestors were super smart no matter where we came from?
Yes.
Okay, so my ancestors, the way they were super smart is that they pretended that they were Mexican and they lived on a ranch in Pleasanton until it was safe for us to come out again and talk about being Indian.
In the 50s and 60s, you had all these tribal groups that were destitute. People dying, starving, economic depression. And people saw that, especially during the activism that came in the 70s with Alcatraz and civil rights. So people said, we need to help these Indians do something for them. And they came up with this process.
Of the thousands of cultures that lived and continue to live here in the United States, only a fraction of those are tribes that have federal recognition status, meaning that they have a sovereign relationship with the United States. Everyone else, we don't have the same rights to protect our ancestors, the same rights to education, and the same rights to health care. Federal recognition is more than just a name, it's a whole complex system of how we navigate in the world as Native people.
It's a process that is about us. It's not by us, for us, or with us. Even one of the developers of the criteria testified in Congress to his belief that the way it's being used is racist. It has made it virtually impossible for Mission California Indians to be recognized. There's too much economics involved along the coast for the government to allow it.
I always knew who I was because my mother always told us who we were. So growing up, I've already known that I was Ohlone. I was an Indian woman on my own land, no matter what the federal government said. I really acknowledge people that are doing the recognition process and the hard work that that must entail, that is not my dream. My life's work is to do the work of the ancestors, is to recreate a place for them to come back to ensure that the culture and the practices continue on for the next 7 generations. Having people realize that Ohlone people still exist has created a different way of looking at recognition.
Here in California, there's a sense that we come here in order to start over. That this is the second chance, you reinvent yourself here, you've left the past behind. And so there's much less reliance on heritage and history to give a sense of identity and place.
You muted, Ariel.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. That was an excerpt of Beyond Recognition. I will put a link in the chat to the whole video. And yeah, Leo, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, I will. So we're going to break it out into groups of 2 to talk about what we just saw. And I'm going to put the questions in the chat. You can go anywhere that feels potent. And what we're suggesting is, what are you thinking, feeling, and what questions are coming up for you? And then, do you see or feel any similarities in your Jewish story, your lineages, with this particular Indigenous story? So I'll blast those questions out once you're in groups. And we'll have about 5 minutes together.
Okay, queuing up the groups, and I'm gonna Ushibore right now.
I invite you or your partner to write something in the chat, some distillation of what came up in your conversation. We know it was quick, and we'd love to hear together what came forward for y'all. Okay, while y'all are doing that, I trust at least a few things will come forward. I'm going to dive us back into Teshuvah and this moment in Jewish time by offering an abridged version of a teaching that Rabbi Dev gave us, who's one of the co-founders of Jewel, on what exactly is going on in this moment in Jewish time. So as I mentioned before, Teshuvah translates to return, returning to a time of wholeness before harms were inflicted. And in the times when there was a temple, we would gather, we would bring an offering to the temple, and that would help support our spiritual alignment, both as people and as a collective. We would give some sacrifice. And because we're not doing that today, there's two tools that we have to obtain that spiritual alignment. The first is Teshuvah, and the second is Yom Kippur. Technically, the third is death, but we'll just stick with the first two for now. And so Teshuvah is this practice of reflecting on your relationship with other people, with the divine, with the more than human world over the past year, and then asking for forgiveness. And so for things that have been, Teshuvah is like good enough, but for larger things, the combined power of Teshuvah and Yom Kippur, which is of the Jewish year, that both of those together is what it takes to seal the deal on really supporting your spiritual alignment. And so some folks believe that there's a collective element to all of this, that we have the capacity to heal maybe how our ancestors committed harms, that we have the capacity and the responsibility to heal the ways in which our countries commit harms, our peoples commit harms. And when the harm is with the divine or the more than human world, doing the process of reflection and asking for forgiveness and prayer in whatever form makes sense for you is dayenu, it's enough. But when the harm is human to human, it requires going to that human directly and at least 3 times asking for forgiveness. So in this larger context of us who have settler colonist lineages in our bodies and whose ancestors came to this land, or maybe we're first generation to come to this land, and our being here created and creates the harm of the displacement and the genocide of indigenous folks, there's a question of what, if at all, can be done to repair this harm on these multiple layers of interpersonal relationships, and as us as a Jewish people, if you believe in nationhood, then us as a nation, like it's a shaky concept, but and also with our ancestors. So what, if you're not the first generation and your ancestors came here, what are the ways in which Indigenous people were harmed in order for your ancestors to land here? So with that overview, and those different parts and the different scales of it, we're going to break out into groups again. And the 2 questions we're going to offer up are there ways in which you and your ancestors are responsible for harms caused to Indigenous people? And then how might we engage in this teshuvah, this repair or return to a time before harms, a wholeness in our relationships, both with Indigenous people and this land? So I'll send you off with those questions. And
how long do we have Leo in these groups?
How are we doing, Ariel? 5 minutes. Okay. Y'all got it.
Okay. A moment. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Nicely done, Leo.
Thank you.
That was dope.
I'm trying to pick out a few from the last time to read.
Yeah, it took a minute, but then they brought it. It's like hella deep.
Yeah.
Reflections.
How important is to know specifics? You sure how it feels immense?
I feel like it's so hard for me, like I'm a very auditory and visual learner. And so I really like both, but I think even more auditory. And so it's like processing what someone says here. It's like, oh yes. But I like feel it so much deeper if we're, of course, in person, like.
Yeah.
Or just even hearing people say shit out loud. But
right.
Yep.
In different voices.
So weird. I love the meme you sent me, Ariel.
Yeah.
What was it? It was like
Tested positive for missing the homies.
So bad, dude. So bad.
So they're in different pairs than they were before, right?
They are.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we come back, I'll ask them to share into the chat their gatherings from this, and then can we each just pick one to read from what's already there, and then again, what they write?
Yeah, we can read the ones from before while folks are writing their new ones
Yeah.
for this round. I definitely feel like it's okay if not everybody gets everything. You know what I mean? Like all these quotes and snippets and stuff, it's all just like, it's impressions and feelings and, connections.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, if they're writing one reflection while someone else is reading another one and they're not, it's okay.
Jesse, can we have this chat afterward? Because maybe we can use it in our promo stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we'll want, we're going to ask everybody to put their emails too. So we'll want that as well.
Oh, wait, I already have them all.
Oh, well, there you go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Yeah. The having people have to like put their name in the email in order to get into the Zoom room makes that really, really easy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just like pull a report in Zoom. So nice.
I love that sentence says, I wonder why the Teshuvah process is different for the more than human world than the human to human. We talked about that in our meeting.
Mm-hmm.
With the meeting with Rabbi Dev, the last round.
Yeah.
What's the synopsis? Can you give me one or no? I'm so sad because usually I feel like our meetings we don't do a lot of like deep dive learning, or the recent ones haven't been. And then like I missed that one. I was like, fuck, like I really wanted to. I read your notes, so your notes were amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, they brought the
Leo's
deep
notes
dive.
are no joke.
Thank you.
You can really get a lot
grad school pedagogy right there.
I'm also a big fan of your notes.
Oh, yay. Great.
Try to Instagram Leo Note Nerd.
That will be my, like on my tombstone, took great notes. That's all I need to be known for.
Good thing. It's a good thing to have your legacy ring into, It's great. What is the difference between human to human or human to whatever?
So traditionally it's only human and God. Those are your only options. But someone in the meeting asked like, well, what if you don't follow Shemitah? Like, what if you don't let the land rest? Like,
right.
Who you asking for forgiveness for? And Dev was like, I think that's like, that was God's law about how to interact with the earth. So.
Speaking of which, is coming up, y'all. In a year.
Your bar mitzvah.
No, Shemitah.
Shemitah, the 7th year of rest or whatever.
Nice.
Who tracks it? Like, how is it tracked?
Okay, I'm gonna close the breakout rooms. Would love to talk to y'all about Shemitah more.
Great.
One of my favorite Jewish subjects. Okay, I'm gonna close the rooms and then I'll have 30 seconds. Okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very good sign. It's a really, really good sign that none of them came back right away.
Welcome back, y'all. Again, we invite you in good timing to write something into the chat that you want to share, and the three of us will read some of the things y'all wrote last time as that's happening. So one thing I'll read out loud is reflections from the movie. We shared about what feels immense about how the Spanish and then Californian carried out genocide against California Indians. which means that a lot of us know less about Ohlone neighbors than we do about the Dene, Navajo, Hopi, Sioux of Standing Rock, or other indigenous nations that we hear about in struggle more predominantly.
I'll share the one that says, you were moved by Karina growing up knowing who her people were and that she was on her own people's land.
Mira, do you want to read one?
How the modern urbanization process of today's cities does not recognize the need for more intimate connections to the land, such as those of the tribes.
Wonderful. So keep adding to the chat anything you want. I know that we have a conversation, and we'll talk more about how to get involved if you want to keep having these conversations. But thank you everyone for engaging with these pieces. And I will pass it to Eric.
Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen and get into this. So we wanted to take a few minutes and give you just kind of like a basic overview of Sogorea Te Land Trust, which is our kind of primary partner and accountability relationship here in the East Bay in terms of who we are working with as Jews on Ohlone land. So Sogorea Te Land Trust was launched in 2015 by these two women. On the right-hand side, you see Karina Gould, tribal chairperson for the Confederated Villages of Ohlone. And she was, of course, featured in the video that we shared before. And on her side is her best friend and longtime collaborator, Janella LaRose, who is Shoshone Bannock, but has her family relocated to the Bay Area like many Native American folks. And they kind of raised their kids together and kind of came up doing grassroots organizing in the Native American community. There are a lot of Ohlone folks here, as this is their land, and there's also a really large intertribal community primarily because of the Forced Relocation Act in the 50s and 60s. The federal government moved folks off the reservation into urban centers around the country as a way to force them to assimilate into kind of mainstream American society. So the Bay Area now has one of the largest urban indigenous populations in the country, actually. And their partnership as an Ohlone leader and an intertribal person kind of embodies what Sogorea Te is all about. This is a little bit about where we in the black and white map over here, we're in the Chochenyo speaking area. Chochenyo is the language. Ohlone is the people, is a specific Ohlone tribe. There are 8 different Ohlone tribes, and Huichin is the place, or Huichun is the place of the East Bay. So a lot of times you'll hear people say Chochenyo Ohlone, which is using the language as a signifier. But anyway, here we are in this place. And then this, in the colorful map, is kind of a little more zoom. And you can see that we are here in the East Bay in Huichin. Sogorea Te Land Trust is an urban indigenous women-led land trust that facilitates the return of indigenous land to indigenous people. So most of the land trusts in the country are focused on conserving land, protecting wild land, which is a very Western colonial concept in relationship to land. Segura Te is right smack in the urban Bay Area. And most land trusts around the country are run by men. And Segura Te is very intentionally a indigenous women-led land trust. Karina Janella's analysis of the way patriarchy and sexism has perpetuated violence against women is parallel to the way that colonialism and capitalism have perpetuated violence and destruction and extraction of the land. And one of the main pieces of work is about rematriation. You'll hear that phrase, rematriate the land. And the working definition is to restore a people to their rightful place in sacred relationship with their ancestral land. So that's really what a lot of the work of Segura Te is about. This is a piece of land. So I'm going to just kind of go through pretty quickly a bunch of pictures, a little bit of history, and some of the current programs of Segura Te, just to kind of give you a snapshot. You should definitely check out their website and follow on Instagram and all the other places, but I just want to just give you a little bit of snapshot. So this is a piece of land in deep East Oakland off 105th Avenue. It's called Ohlone, and that circle of people is where a quarter acre of land was rematriated back to Segura Te from Planting Justice. It's the first piece of rematriated land in the East Bay that is returned to indigenous hands since Spanish contact 200 and something years ago. And it's one of Segura Te's active land sites. This is Janella with a model of the sacred arbor, which is one of the things that they had a vision to build the sacred arbor as part of the work of bringing ceremony back to this land, ceremony that hasn't happened here in over 200 years. So folks went up to Sonoma to sustainably harvest redwood logs and bring them back. There were a lot of work days and community volunteer days where folks came out to help work the land. You can see the logs on the ground. People were, not skinning them, but like taking the bark off and doing all the work and slowly building what has become the first sacred arbor on this land in a very, very long time. So that was one main accomplishment of what Segura Te has already done, really kind of historic reclamation work of the spiritual life and the relationship to the land. There's also a lot of cultural revitalization work. This is folks on the staff harvesting tule reeds. Tule, of course, is an important material that folks use to build houses and boats and all sorts of stuff. This is bunch of the Segura Te staff, and you can see they made the tule reeds as part of the shade structure for the arbor. And then this summer, a hummingbird came and made a nest in the tule reeds, in the woven tule reeds on the sacred arbor. And one of our staff members, Chata, caught this photo of the hummingbird, which I just think is an extraordinary blessing. There's been a fair amount of ceremony and just different hosting. There's all kinds of gathering, reclaiming the use of plants, harvesting now in Coyote Hills Regional Park and Fremont. That right on the right is Kai, Karina's grandson. They're also bringing the Chochenyo language back, really from the edge of extinction. There's only a handful of fluent speakers right now. And like Karina said in the video, her great-grandfather, Jose Guzman, was the last fluent speaker. So he actually was recorded by a UC Berkeley anthropologist on wax cylinders, speaking and singing and talking. And they're using these wax cylinders they've used them to recreate a dictionary and vocabulary and all these things. Now, of course, there's an app on your smartphone, right, for Chochenyo language learning. So really kind of straddling, 21st century technology and this ancient language that has been spoken on this land for thousands of years. More of the work. This is another one of Segura Te's land sites. It's Ramai in West Oakland. It's our urban garden. And a lot of the work is about cultivating native and traditional medicinal plants and bringing, the relationship back to the land with the plants and the medicine in the ceremony. So this is the site in West Oakland and the urban garden there. Building a tobacco drying shed and tool shed and other things. There's also one of the programs is called Hametka, which is a Chochenyo word for together in one place, everyone together in one place. And this is super relevant now because it's about creating emergency response and community resiliency hubs for disaster, for like climate change and natural disasters. So Segorte is outfitting these areas with first aid and solar power and water filtration and medical supplies and communication stations and everything communities need in the face of a climate disaster or emergency. Part of the analysis is like this. LaShawn is located in Deep East Oakland in the Sabranti Park neighborhood. And just recognizing that, you know, working class communities of color are often the last to receive any kind of emergency services or support from the government or from anyone else really in the case of a major emergency. So folks have to take care of themselves and each other. And the other big piece of the Segorte Land Trust is what's called the She'umi land tax. She'umi is a Chochenyo word that means gift. And the She'umi land tax is basically an invitation for non-Indigenous people who live on this land to basically make a financial contribution every year and kind of pay the She'umi land tax as a way to acknowledge the history of genocide and colonization that has happened on this land, to acknowledge that our lives as settlers or descendants of settlers or non-Ohlone and non-Indigenous people here, everything that we do and, you know, the land that we live on, the parks, the schools, the grocery stores, the houses, everything, our life is connected and enabled by that history of genocide and land theft. And so we have a responsibility and relationship to play at least a small part in transforming that and giving back after so much has been taken. So this was launched in 2015 along with this with the Land Trust, and has become a practice that many people in the East Bay do, paying monthly or annually to support the work of the Segorte Land Trust. And this is really a lot of what our work at Jews on Ohlone Land is about, is, like I said earlier, we have a goal of getting to 100% of the Jewish community individually and institutionally to contribute to the She'umi land tax. The last thing I'll say about it is that it's an invitation also to institutions that are based here. So nonprofit organizations, businesses, schools, religious institutions who operate and are based on this land, to also make a financial contribution and to think about the kind of resources that any particular institution has, access to clients, access to staff, all sorts of things. Institutions have lots of different kinds of resources. And to figure out how to contribute that to the work of rematriation and to support the Indigenous community locally. So that is a brief snapshot of Segorte Land Trust and the She'umi land tax. And I'll pass it. Oh, I can't see the chat. Can someone read the question?
Yeah. Daniel's curious, what is Jewel's relationship with the Land Trust and Segorte? I just thought you'd be best to answer that.
Sure. Well, so Rabbi Dev Noily and I started Jews on Ohlone Land last, spring of 2019. And we both had personal and direct communication and relationship with Segorte Land Trust. And we were thinking together about ways to mobilize the Jewish community and wanted to do that work. So we talked talked to her and Segorte about it. And they were like, that's a great idea, go for it. And we were like, okay, cool. So we have a pretty close relationship. I am on staff at Segorte, so I work daily with everybody and am able to kind of translate and pass, information back and forth. And we check pretty closely with any major campaign or any major event and major direction that we do to make sure that we are in alignment and support of what their leadership and their work is about. So I would say it's a pretty close relationship. And with that, and I would definitely encourage everybody to check out the website, segortelandtrust.org, and we'll put that in the chat for more information. And I will pass it over to Mira to talk about Jewel.
Thank you, Ariel. So I invite everyone to take a breath and center back into your body. Received a lot of information, a lot of powerful images, a lot of heavy realities, of course, that we named earlier on. And before I tell you more about Jewel and some of our extended kind of mission as a group, I want us to think about what we saw this morning as we woke up, if you're in the Bay Area. I know I can speak for myself and the friends and family I was in communication with, is just this deep sense of fear and grief and wow, and such an incredible, part of it is beautiful and amazing, and part of it is a deep sense of the unknown and a deep calling from the earth for us to reframe and for us to recenter leadership and recenter who is making the decisions of what happens on this land. And I think we're living in an incredibly wild, scary, crazy time, and also an incredibly hopeful time in which we have the capacity to really shift our energy and really shift our work into giving directly to the folks who have been tending to this land for thousands and thousands of years. And not just through a donation that, or a tax rather, not a donation, but a tax for us as settlers on this land, which again, as Ariel said, our goal is to have 100% Jewish participation in the She'umi land tax. But even thinking beyond that in terms of what does it mean to be in a right relationship with Native folks? And while for some people paying the tax might be enough, other folks, if you read the essay, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor, might be asking us to leave, might be asking us to give up power, to give up leadership, to give up decision-making that we have. And so our group is not just about, paying this tax and necessarily staying here as settlers, but also investigating the ways in which, what does it mean to be in right relationship? And of course, every Native community might have a different answer to that. There's not a monolith in terms of folks' relationship to that. But one thing that I do appreciate about this group is that the variety of experience and the variety of opinion and space that folks take up in terms of interrogating that question. So we're also really into supporting Jewish organizations to integrate and center Indigenous history of the East Bay and the Bay in general into Jewish education for children and teens and adults. As I said, I'm from San Francisco. I went to Jewish preschool, Jewish K through 8th, Jewish Sunday school, Jewish summer camp, and in none of those places was the name Ohlone ever said. I don't think, and I have a lot of shame and grief around this, that I don't think I knew the term Ohlone until I was in my mid-20s. And the fact that I was deeply steeped in, quote unquote, liberal leftist Jewish education, and I didn't actually know the histories of this land, is of course part of the larger colonial project. So we have an obligation to really recenter those relationships and be teaching the actual very heavy histories that often, ironically, young people are way more eager and ready and capable of engaging than we are as adults. We are also working towards having Jews show up for Indigenous-led events and campaigns, like the organizing on Alcatraz Island in honor of Thanksgiving or Indigenous Peoples Day, or on the Shell Mound in Emeryville on Black Friday, in which a lot of people shop on that land and don't honor it as a sacred burial site. So there's lots of ways in which we can physically show up. And now, of course, that's complicated a little bit, but we'll tell you about an upcoming event in which you can show up. And lastly, we're really focused on also supporting a national network of Jews working with Indigenous folks on solidarity and fighting for Indigenous sovereignty. And that work is happening across Turtle Island. Leo is connected, Ariel's connected to a lot of that work. They can explain more if y'all have specific questions. But we are definitely, we want money and resources. Maybe you pay your tax, or maybe you will your home to Sigorte. I saw Ariel put on Facebook that someone recently put their IRA or their 401k in Sigorte's name. That's pretty rad. Maybe you take your inheritance and give it to Sigorte. There's so many ways beyond just the annual contribution that you can give and send to this work. So Ariel's going to talk about next steps, and we definitely want you to plug in with monthly meetings, online campaigns, Instagram. Currently, we're on this campaign of shofars for She'umi, which is focused on getting folks to contribute during this sacred month of Elul, where we're working to make things right. And of course, as we're in an ever increasing digital world, the digital focus is definitely an important component of sharing this work. Thank you. Go ahead, Ariel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. Let me just find where I'm at here. All right, so we are talking about next steps. Couple of invitations for you. Like Mira said, we are in the middle of a campaign called Shofars for Shumi for this sacred month of Elul, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, inviting us all to think about our practices of Teshuvah and to think about paying the Shumi land practice, learning more about the history of this land as a part of that practice, thinking about our own family stories and narratives, how we got here, what our relationship to the colonial project is, all of those things. And we also want to make a specific invitation, and when I have a chance, I'll drop a link in the chat to Tashlik ritual, a community Tashlik ritual that we're doing on Sunday 20th at 3 o'clock. We're going to gather in person outside, socially distanced, at the West Berkeley Shell Mound at 4th Street. And we're collaborating with Kahila Community Synagogue and Jewish Youth for Community Action on this community ritual. We're going to gather at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, which is, to my knowledge, I think, the first time there's ever been a collective Jewish ritual at an Ohlone shell mound, like at the 1,000-year-old sacred site of this land. I think this might be true, the case. But anyway, we're going to gather at the West Berkeley shell mound and then walk or drive, if you prefer, over to the Berkeley Marina, and then do our tashlit on the water there at the marina. So again, I'll put the link in the chat, but that's Sunday. It's the second day, the afternoon of the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the 20th at 3 o'clock. Yeah, definitely want to invite you all to check out the website, jewsonohloneland.org. And if you'd like specifically to be added to our listserv where we let folks know about meetings and other events and stuff, feel free to drop your email into the chat and we will share more resources and more information there. And I'll pass it over to you, Leo.
Wonderful. We really appreciate everyone coming out tonight and spending this time together, doing this deep dive, showing up for ourselves, land, and the possibility of repairing relationships with Indigenous folks. And it's definitely a multi-generational process. Not going to end in our lifetimes, but I feel it's our responsibility to engage with it. So as we're closing, I invite folks to write just one next step you want to take in this vein. Could be paying Sh'umi, it could be going to Sigurd, his website. It could be putting your email in the chat to join our listserv. One tangible thing that you want to take with you. And while you're thinking that over, maybe Ariel, we could have a little more music. Yeah, and also feel free to write questions in the chat too that we can address in our final moments together. I'll read some of these out loud. Pei Shumi, yay! Encouraging more people I know to pay Shumi. Checking out our website. Talking about connections with organizations collaborating with Bedouin rights movements for recognition. Yeah, let's talk about it. Paying personal household Sh'umi, watching Beyond Recognition, trying to make it to the Shalman Tashlich. Yes, please do. Great. You already give Sh'umi. You're going to commit to the Tashlich and come to other Ohlone and Jewel actions this year. Wonderful. Have discussion with housemates to pay Sh'umi and attending the Tashlich event. Great. Yeah, contact Malcolm Margolin and get his input. After all, he wrote the Ohlone Way. Would like to talk to others who are part of institutions about how they can give Sh'umi when they have all these restrictions around funding. Yep. Go to the Tashlich. I already have promoted this to 3 different orgs. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing. Beautiful. So we're adding those in. Just want to call in the waters one more time. Give them our gratitude. Thank you for your power, for making life possible, for bringing balance, for hearing and witnessing us. And again, if it feels right to you to go give it to the earth afterward, I invite you to. Really good to be with you.